All right. How you doing, huh? What a nice day. Not really. But guess what? We're still gonna do a tour. We're still gonna do a little walk. And today we're covering the very nice neighborhood of Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, huh? Look at that. I'm gonna take my little trusty umbrella. These are New York technology, huh? They patented this. You buy them, $5, and after one use, it disintegrates into dust. Pretty cool. All right. Anyways, we're doing Bay Ridge today. Before we start, Rob, how are you?
All right.
Okay. Seems like you're pretty unenthusiastic about today. Hopefully that changes, but we're gonna be covering Bay Ridge. Before we start, guys, check out the Patreon. Huge help. That's how we fund these things. That's how I fund the puddle jumper I had to take to get here, and then connect to the R, which connects to the L, connects to the J, connects to the M, all the 10 trains I took to get here, and the caravan of camels I had to jump on, and then the freight trains I hopped on as a hobo for 2 years to get here, all right? I don't know what to tell you. We got a lot to cover. I don't wanna ramble too much. Rob, are you ready to do this?
Let's do it.
Let's go. Okay, so we're gonna do the early history here from outside of this gazebo in the middle of here, this little park. Now, it started out Native Americans, right? So the Native Americans, the Canarsie specifically, which were also under the Algonquin Nation along with the Lenape, they inhabited this part of Brooklyn, and there were paths and trading posts, all kinds of things here. Then the Dutch settle. This becomes kind of a suburb of New Amsterdam here. And by 1661, there were 6 different towns that made up what is today Brooklyn, right? Brooklyn being one of them. Sorry if I'm butchering that, whatever. But it swallowed up the others. One of them being New Utrecht, which was here. And it was actually what is today Bay Ridge. So New Utrecht got pulled into the rest of Brooklyn in 1894. Then Brooklyn gets pulled into New York City in 1898. Now, something to keep in mind, New Utrecht is actually like Brooklyn, which was named after a town in the Netherlands, was also named after Utrecht, which was actually chartered in 1122, the year 1122. It was a good year. I was just graduating grad school, had the whole world ahead of me. I'm kidding, I'm young. Initially, it was called Yellow Hook because of the hue of the clay that was located here. Remember, think of Red Hook. I covered Red Hook in a video. Same thing, Red Hook was called that because of the clay on that area. But Yellow Hook, they changed the name in 1853 to Bay Ridge because of yellow fever epidemics that hit Brooklyn a little later than they hit Manhattan, because Manhattan was a little more heavily populated, densely populated, and they didn't think it would be good to call it, Yellow Hook. It was like living in Yellow Feverville. That's kind of weird, so they changed it to Bay Ridge because it's a ridge that looks over the Bay of New York. I'm sorry if you guys were watching that with loved ones or something and their head just exploded with that fact, but it's true. So it stayed pretty uninhabited for a little while, but one quick thing, this is the part of Brooklyn where the British invaded in August 1776 to start the Battle of Long Island. And then they pushed their way all the way through Brooklyn to the water to where the Brooklyn Bridge is today, and they won the battle and beat the hell out of the Continental Army, but it almost ended the entire war. Washington escapes under the cover of night to fight another day, and they eventually have to bail New York and come back at the end to retake it from the British. And it was New York was the headquarters of the British during the entire Revolution. I've talked about this battle in a million videos, but this is where they kind of entered, and then along with Hessian troops and everything, just pushed the Continental Army and creamed them, but pushed them all the way back. So a lot of stuff happened before it became Bay Ridge here, but we're gonna keep it moving. We still got more to talk about. Rob, you ready to go?
Let's go.
Let's go. Okay, we're still in the same park we were just in. This is actually John Paul Jones Park. It's named after a Navy guy, not the basis for Led Zeppelin, all you music buffs. But I'm actually now next to Fort Hamilton, the entrance to Fort Hamilton. Take a look. Pretty cool, look at that. Sadly, this is the closest we could get because we got shooed away by some guy who's on a power trip. Won't let some guy just talk about history outside. So, brought us back out here to a bench. But this fort was put there in 1829. named after good old Alexander Hamilton, pretty cool. Actually had people like Robert E. Lee stationed there. You know Robert E. Lee? Yeah, pretty great general. May have been greater if he didn't fight for slavery, but you know, you hear people sometimes talk about this part of Bay Ridge as the neighborhood of Fort Hamilton, but chances are if someone's calling this area of Fort Hamilton that, they're trying to sell you a house or rent you an expensive apartment, because that's what you do. You carve out parts of neighborhoods and name them something else and then jack up the prices. But this is kind of the southern part here of Bay Ridge along the water near the bridge next to the base, which is still an active military base actually. 200 different units of the National Guard and the Army's Reserve are stationed through here. The National Guard is like, you know, in the movies when Godzilla attacks a city, it's the National Guard that goes out and gets swatted away and burnt to a crisp because you know, that's who gets sent out on things like that. It actually served as an embarkation point for World War I and World War II, and as a place to train volunteers for the Civil War even. So it's been around for a long time. This area was also kind of like a wealthy suburb as well for people like I'll talk about a little later, people who started to kind of put their houses here and had property and stuff. This also became one because we're right on the water. All right, we better get out of here before the Army comes out here with tanks and tells us, get out of here with your little camera and your little video, because they don't have anything better to do. All right, let's go. Okay, so Bay Ridge was kind of just this sleepy, farms, all those kinds of things. It wasn't really until like the mid-1800s, even like before that people started to build townhouses and things like that, like the Bennett Farrell Feldman house behind me. So this is 119 95th Street. This is one of the oldest houses in the neighborhood. In fact, the oldest is 7535 Shore Road. They say, it's not exact, but they say it's that one. We're at this one because this one's kind of one of the more famous ones, all right? Plus, I don't have a car. We're walking around, so relax. So this man named Joseph Bennett, 1847, builds this house. Then James Farrell, an Irish immigrant, comes in and takes over, and then the Feldmans come in the early 1900s, buy it, and actually move it a few blocks. That's right, how's that for a fixer-upper? You know, it's not like you're redoing the kitchen, you're moving the entire house somewhere. So they moved it here, and it's been here ever since. Very pretty little example of Greek revival, which was very popular in that first half of the 1800s. So it was little houses like this, and mostly farms and things like that kind of inhabited this area all through the 1800s, believe it or not, until certain developments came up that we'll talk about a little later, okay? So it's in the mid-1800s too that the first artists start to move here. So they rename it Bay Ridge, and artists move in around that same time in an area called Ovington, which is a little north of us, between like 3rd and 7th, and also like 69th, 72nd, around there. There was an area called Ovington that was bought up. It was a farm bought up by a bunch of artists, dozens of artists, and they lived there. Look at that. So they got gentrified in the 1850s, huh? How about that? So you had all these kind of things. People started moving out here, but like I said, stays pretty rural throughout the rest of the 1800s, and there are certain developments that change that. I'm not an expert in real estate, but if I had to guess on the price tag of this house, I'd probably say somewhere in the ballpark of
$7.9 trillion.
Give or take 1 or 2 trillion. Okay, let's keep it moving. Okay, so a quick note. I wanted to stop real quick here and talk about one of the biggest developments in the neighborhood. Before we get to that, it's important to remember 1894 was when New Utrecht was pulled into Brooklyn, right? Then in 1898, Brooklyn is pulled into New York City. That's consolidation. January 1st, 1898, Brooklyn voted to consolidate by just a few hundred votes. It was really tragic for some people. Brooklyn was its own city before that. Remember, it had its own, newspaper, its own like New York Times type thing, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. Walt Whitman worked for it, huh? You guys might know that name. Leaves of Grass, that's right, the book that Bill Clinton gave Monica Lewinsky. But anyways, it got pulled into New York City, so it became one giant city. Overnight, became the second largest city in the world, behind only London. It's a huge deal, right? So then the infrastructure is going to be built out as well throughout the 1900s, and behind me is the R train. This was the BMT. So the BMT gets expanded and actually goes all the way down here. And it helped bring a lot of the settlement. So this is early 1900s, brought more and more people. This is where you start getting the apartment buildings, the more densely populated area. So this is a very, very important development here in this part of Brooklyn that was pretty far out. Remember, this used to be kind of farmland and a little more sparsely populated. So these are very important things to keep in mind. Also, 1930s, the Belt Parkway is built by Robert Moses, good old Bobby Moses. That's right, one of the most controversial figures in New York history. Demolished a lot of New York, built a lot of New York, cleaned up a lot of New York, made you know, some neighborhoods worse by demolishing certain things and building highways through them and all that stuff. But he did build a lot of roads. Loved the car, that guy, even though he didn't even drive his own car. He had people driving him around. Anyways, not to get on that, he did build the Belt Parkway, which loops around here in Bay Ridge as well. So it gets pulled in to the bigger city, is really kind of where I'm getting at. And that brought more people and brought immigrants from neighborhoods that were connected by this infrastructure, like the R train. And we'll talk about these here in a little bit, these different nationalities. So, Rob, what are you ready? You ready to do this? Ready to keep moving?
Yeah.
We're getting rained on. It's a crummy, crumb day. Let's go. Okay, so a lot of people pass through Bay Ridge, a lot of different groups, a lot of different ethnicities, you know. This is one of the ones that makes the neighborhood unique, and it's the Norwegians. That's right, the Norwegians. I'm actually here in Leif Erikson Park. That's right, Leif Erikson, never heard of him? He's the guy who actually, they say, discovered America in the year 1000, which I'm sure you know if you used to watch, you know, the VH1 series I Love the Thousands. But he passed through, they say he passed through here, and they have this little thing here kind of dedicated to him. It's this whole park, Leif Erikson Park here. We're actually like 66th and 4th, kind of stretches the north end of Bay Ridge. But the Norwegians came here in the 1900s to actually work on the docks. So this park was actually, the land was acquired in 1895, then it was dedicated in 1934 by good old Fiorello LaGuardia. And then this was dedicated in 1939 by His Royal Highness Crown Prince Olav of Norway, which I'm sure you guys loved Olav. You guys are all big fans of Olav. Now it's interesting because I talked about the Norwegians also in my Sunset Park video because they were actually, you know, settled there as well as the Finnish population. And there's actually a street called Lapskaus Boulevard. They named it Lapskaus Boulevard, which goes north-south. And that's actually, well, it's like naming the street Norwegian Beef Stew Boulevard because that's what it means. And it's interesting because actually coming up soon is the Sitten de Mai Festival. Did I pronounce that right, Rob?
You got it.
Thank you so much. And that is the Independence Day Festival, May 17th, coming up here pretty soon. So yeah, they can do all that stuff here in the North. And in fact, the Norwegian population reached around like 55,000 at its peak in the 1940s, which is a lot. That's a big chunk of the people here. So Norwegians very, very important in this area. They don't really know what actually Leif Erikson looked like because, you know, it was a long time ago. But using DNA technology, we were able to come up with this sketch. Pretty cool, right? And this thing that I'm just casually laying on and leaning on, totes cash, you know, cool guy over here, is actually a replica of a rune stone, which were these big stones that the Vikings used to put up in like in honor of certain things and to commemorate certain events. Pretty cool, huh? The Vikings being the culture in Scandinavia. Speaking of which, Rob, you're a Viking, huh?
Sure.
You're Norwegian, aren't you?
Yep.
There you go, look at that. I got a Viking man in the camera here, pretty cool. I can't go anywhere without him killing some wild animal and just eating it in front of me raw. He's a psychopath, but he's very dependable, like all Vikings. I didn't mean to say that Vikings are psychopaths, or Scandinavians are psychopaths. What am I talking about? And keep in mind too, Norway is actually a fairly recently new country. It's obviously got its culture that dates back centuries, but Norway itself wasn't an independent country until 1905 when it seceded from its union with Sweden, which it entered into after the Napoleonic Wars. You guys know all that stuff, huh? You guys are all you Napoleonic warheads. But anyways, I'm rambling. Norwegians, pretty cool. Let's keep it moving. Okay, well, look at that. Guess where I am? I'm at the entrance to New York Harbor here, in front of the Verrazzano Bridge. Ooh, this is a really big deal here in Bay Ridge. Pops right into Bay Ridge. It actually demolished around, well, it displaced around 7,000 people, 800 buildings to build the entrances to this gigantic bridge. But this thing was finished in 1964. Swiss guy, Othmar Ammann, is the architect, the engineer. He's actually the guy who built the George Washington Bridge as well. 3 people died building this thing, man. This is the longest suspension bridge in North America, which is pretty cool. It also takes you right there into Staten Island. The actual towers, the span of the bridge is around 4,200 feet, man. Almost a mile span, which means it's being suspended there. That's pretty crazy. Also, another interesting fact, the 2 towers, because they're so long, there's actually almost an inch of distance that they actually peak out because of the curvature of the Earth. Huh? How's that for a fact? Pretty cool there. But you may recognize this bridge from, you know, Saturday Night Fever, all you John Travolta heads. Also from the starting line of the New York Marathon. Leaves here every year. I don't know about you guys, but every time someone tells me they ran a marathon, I always have 2 questions for them. How fast did you run it in, and who cares? The name to this bridge was actually misspelled initially because of contract typos. So it's named after a man named Giovanni da Verrazzano, who was an Italian explorer hired by the French to basically find a route to India like everyone was trying to do in the 1500s. He's actually sailing up the coast and pops his head in here and realizes, whoa, this is something interesting, plants the French flag. But by the way, this guy died. He ended up going to the Caribbean, gets out of his boat, and goes and meets up with the natives there, and he's actually eaten by cannibals. That's right. How you doing? But he was eaten by cannibals, and all the people on his boat actually just watched him get eaten by cannibals. Pretty wild. Anywho, this was named after him as a way to kind of, you know, celebrate Italian pride, huh? Especially considering so many Italians were displaced to build this freaking thing. Problem was they misspelled the name. They actually had it with only 1 Z, and it was supposed to have 2 Zs. So in 2016, they actually made a push to rename it, and that culminated in 2018 with a law passed to rename the bridge with the 2 Zs. In all fairness, no one hears the name Verrazzano with 1 Z and thinks, that guy is definitely not Italian. Sounds Italian either way, but, you know, for the sake of accuracy, right? Another interesting fact about the construction of this bridge is that the Mohawk Native Americans built a lot of this too, as they built a lot of the projects throughout the 20th century and they continue to build because they are known for their iron work, especially at high altitudes. They started getting into this work in the 1880s, actually, outside of Quebec. The St. Lawrence River had bridges going over it, etc. And they realized, and people realized that, whoa, these guys are really good with iron work and aren't afraid of altitudes. They didn't have the same kind of fears and vertigos that other people got, so they got more involved here in New York City, and especially in the building boom, like the 1920s and stuff. They would build the skyscrapers, the Empire State Buildings, the bridges, all these things were those Mohawk Indians, and in fact, they had a little settlement of Mohawks down in, or up in Boerum Hill here in Brooklyn. I'll cover that in a Boerum Hill video in the future, but they were famous for building this. You know what I'm talking about, because most people, when they get at high altitudes, they get kind of, you know, dizzy or they get vertigo and they end up dying. In fact, I was once visiting Machu Picchu, pretty cool. I should have done a video, that was a long time ago, and I talked to one of the rangers there, and he said that like 2 people die every year because they get too close to the edge and they just fall off. Just kind of dark, sorry, but a few years ago, someone died because they were trying to take a jumping Instagram photo and then died off of the side. Kind of sucks. That's a crappy way to go. You know, it's like, I don't know what to say other than OMG, have mercy on their soul, huh? You know, it's kind of embarrassing. One more interesting fact is that they were going to name this bridge after John F. Kennedy because it was shortly after he was killed. Sorry, I hate to break it to you. Spoiler alert, John F. Kennedy is dead. But after he died, they wanted to name something after him. But they wanted to name it the Verrazzano Bridge. It was a push back and forth. So as like a concession, they actually ended up naming the Idlewild Airport the JFK Airport. Look at that, man. Damn, look at that. I just fit a lot of stuff in there. Anyways, that's pretty much it here. I say we can, what do you think, Rob? Should we keep it moving?
Yeah.
How you doing? Cool car, bro. Anyways, I'm here now on Fifth Avenue to talk about the neighborhood today. The neighborhood today is an extremely diverse neighborhood. You have Greek, who date back to, decades. You have Latin American, you have Chinese, you have all kinds of groups that make their home here, including the Arab community. This is actually the highest concentration of the Arab community here in New York City. 10% of the neighborhood, about 8,000 people, which is pretty amazing. You have Little Yemen, Little Palestine. You have great restaurants like Al-Aqsa Bakery, which we just went to. We had some great falafel. You have Nablus, where you can get the kunifa. Sorry, I'm butchering that. And it's really this really great sweet. It has kind of like this gooey. Anyways, a lot of great neighborhood spots here. That immigration, initially, the first Arab population was actually Christian from Syria and Lebanon in like the 1920s, around that time. And then in the 1970s, it started to pick up from the actual Muslim community from places like Palestine and Yemen and Egypt. So all these kind of stores and people make their home here. And because of that, you have lately this is where people will gather, and there are protests and all that for the things that are happening in Palestine today. And also, interestingly enough, after 9/11, you had a lot of discrimination and harassment here in this same neighborhood for that community as well. So a lot of these things kind of happening here because this is a center of that culture here in New York City, here in Bay Ridge. And like I said, it's on top of the Greek community, on top of the Latin American and Mexican community, on top of the Chinese community, and formerly the Italian community. Now, interestingly, I didn't talk about the Italians as much in this video because they kind of were they were Bensonhurst as well, and I talked about them in Bensonhurst, so you can watch that video. Might have already plugged that one. But you also had Irish before that. Once again, this was a little further down from Sunset Park, but they made their way down here even though it is a little further away because of the docks and piers that were being worked around that, like the mid to late 1800s and even early 1900s. So all this up there. So there's a lot going on. I'm covering a lot. You also have right behind me the Alpine Cinemas, which is actually the oldest movie theater in Brooklyn, 1921, and it's still privately owned and still kicking cheap movies and stuff. So you can check those out while you're here too. But yeah, what do you think? Did I cover that all right, Rob?
You got it.
All right. Well then, let's just keep it moving. What a day. We covered a lot, huh? Look at that, man. Only 25 minutes-ish, and we went through a ton. We went through the early history, the Canarsie. We went through the farmland, the little houses, the Greek revival houses, the immigrants, the Norwegians. We went through the Verrazzano Bridge. So much to cover. One day I'll do a video on every one of these things, but for today, we got a nice little intro. Rob, what'd you think? Did you learn about your neighborhood? This is where you live. I shouldn't tell people that. All the fans are gonna come hunt you down. But what'd you think?
Not bad.
Yeah? All right, well, guys, if you liked it, please check out the Patreon. There's extras on there, little, videos and all kinds of little podcasts, everything. That's how we fund these things. Also, too, like and subscribe. Big help. Aside from that, we did it, man. That's pretty much it. What do you think, Rob? Should we go grab some Greek food?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it. Thank you, guys. Thanks for making it this far in the video and in life. See y'all later. Say.